Rodrigo González de Lara was a Castilian nobleman of the House of Lara. Early in his career he ruled that half of Asturias allocated to Castile. He was faithful to the crown throughout the reign of Queen Urraca, during which time he was married to the Queen's half-sister and ruled a large part of the old County of Castile. He and his elder brother, Pedro González, led the opposition to Alfonso VII early in his reign. He led a revolt in 1130 and was exiled in 1137. He was a leader in the Reconquista, about which the contemporary chronicler Alfonso Imperatores has much to say, and also took part in the military activities of the Crusader states on 2 occasions. He traveled widely throughout Spain, but ended his days in Palestine. Youth under Alfonso VI, Rodrigo was a son of Gonzalo Núñez de Lara and Godo Núñez, and kinsman of Gonzalo Salvadores. Rodrigo's inheritance was modest. A certain Rodrigo González, who was alferez of Alfonso VI between the 29th of January 1078 and the 9th of June 1081, may have been Rodrigo González de Lara. If so, he was a very old man when he died. The alferez did sign the Carta de Arras of Rodrigo Díaz de Viva el Cid Campida, in 1080/1. A Rodrigo González who signed 8 royal diplomas between 1092 and 1099 has also been identified with the alferez, the son of Gonzalo Núñez, and the later Crusader governing the Asturias. Rodrigo González de Lara first appears holding a fief from the crown on the 29th of February 1112, when he was governing all the Cantabrian region south of the river Miera, the valley of Mena, and Asturias de Santillana, formerly held by his cousin Rodrigo Muñoz. By 1119 he was ruling the Trasmiera, the region north of the Miera, which up until then had also been held by Rodrigo Muñoz. He is not recorded there after 1120, by which time his rule had extended westward over Aguilar de Campo. At the same time he first appeared as governing in Castile, probably a reference to Old Castile. Certainly he was not governing all of Castile. There are references to account Rodrigo governing Castile as early as the 9th of May 1112, but this may be Rodrigo Muñoz. By the 13th of April 1121 Rodrigo was a count. In 1122 he made a donation to the Benedictine monastery of Santa Maria de Piasca. Sometime before 1122 Rodrigo married Sancha, a daughter of Alfonso VI and his 4th wife Isabel. She bore him 3 daughters, Elvira, Sancha, and Urraca. Rodrigo confirmed a total of 15 royal charters during Urraca's reign. It was during the final 6 years of Urraca's reign, a period of general peace, that Rodrigo held power in the Kingdom of Leon. As early as 1120 he was governing Liébana, and by 1122 he was also governing Nangulo, Piedras Negras, and the Tierra de Campos. By 1125 he was ruling Purnia as well. A private document dated the 17th of June 1126 refers to both Rodrigo and Pedro as holding Lara, Campos, and Asturias de Santillana, seemingly jointly. The rule in none of these places can be traced after Urraca's death. On the 10th of May 1125 at Sahagun, Rodrigo and the Queen made a joint donation of the monastery at Viga to the Order of Fontevraud. His wife Sancha was dead by that time, and Urraca, the youngest daughter, was put in the custody of Sancha Raimunde, the king's sister. Rebellion against Alfonso VII. There is a false document dated the 18th of April 1125 that names Rodrigo González as Villicus Imperatores, that is, Imperial Major Domo. After the Queen's death on 8 March 1126, the Towers of Leon, that is, the royal fortress in the city of Leon, refused to submit to her son, Alfonso VII, preferring the rule of Pedro González, who had been the Queen's lover, and his brother Rodrigo, whom the author of the Chronica Adafonsi says preferred war rather than peace with the king. Eventually the brothers were forced to make submission to Alfonso VII and did not do so willingly, as the other magnates. Other counts saw that the king's power was increasing daily. They were the Castilians, Pedro de Lara and his brother, Rodrigo González, who lived in Asturias de Santillana. Gimeno Iniguez was also present. He governed Coyanza in the territory of Leon. They were indeed frightened, and as such, they directed their attention toward arranging a peace conference. However, their treaty with the king was made in a most insincere manner. Actually, they preferred to follow the King of Aragon. In 1127 he sold an estate at Arce to the parish of Santillana del Mar. There is evidence, in the form of a 13th-century copy of a private charter, that Alfonso tried to lure Rodrigo to his side by making him alferez in the winter of 1127–28. Despite their earlier submission, Pedro, Rodrigo, and their allies refused to join the army Alfonso assembled at Atienza in 1129 to fight Alfonso I of Aragon and Navarre. The king then relieved Rodrigo of his post as alferez, replacing him with Pedro Alfonses. Early in 1130 he rebelled against the king. The rebellion seems to have been designed to place on the throne Fernando Pérez de Lara, Rodrigo's nephew, an illegitimate son of Pedro González and Queen Urraca. It had the support of Alfonso of Aragon and of his agent in Castile, Bertrand de Risnel, son-in-law of Pedro. While Pedro and Bertrand took the city of Palencia, and another relative of Rodrigo's, Gimeno Iniguez, rebelled at Valencia de Don Juan. Rodrigo took up arms in Asturias de Santillana, the northwestern part of Castile. A minor noble, Pedro Diaz, rebelled from his castle of Vale. He was put down by the brothers Osorio and Rodrigo Martinez. By June the king had retaken Palencia and captured Pedro and Bertrand. Having dealt with the other rebels, Alfonso turned to Asturias, where he captured the fortified castles, set fire to the fields and hacked down the trees and vineyards. Forced to sue for peace, Rodrigo sent envoys requesting a meeting with the king on the banks of the Pisuerga. But the agreement, Rodrigo and Alfonso would each be accompanied by only 6 of the knights. During the meeting the king became so enraged by Rodrigo's disrespectful remarks that he seized him by the throat and they both fell from their horses. At this Rodrigo's retinue fled and the count was taken as if he were a common prisoner. Rodrigo found his castles and tenancies confiscated, with Asturias placed in the hands of Rodrigo Gomez. There is a record of a comitum Rodricum Gundus Luida Asturias present on 3 November 1140 at the hearing of a dispute between the Bishop of Burgos, Ramiro, and the Bishop of Calahorra, Sancho, in the presence of the king, but it is probably unreliable. It is unlikely that Rodrigo ever regained his place in eastern Asturias. Within a few days of his being released, Rodrigo returned to acknowledge his crimes and seek mercy, which he received by the end of 1131, when he was appointed Alcaide of Toledo in place of Gutiérrez Armildez, who had died. Frontier rule. Rodrigo waged numerous wars against the Moors. He killed many and took many prisoners. He also carried away large quantities of booty from the lands. The author of the Chronica twice states that only a fraction of his military actions are recorded. He had fought many battles in Moorish territory. The military experiences of Rodrigo González and Rodrigo Fernández against the Moors were indeed great, but they have not been described in this book, and the other battles which the consul Rodrigo fought with the king of the Almoravides are not recorded in this book. Rodrigo's government in Toledo can be traced in the documents between 1132 and 1136, and he was also governor of Segovia in 1133. The Chronica Adefonsi records that Alfonso entrusted Toledo to him and extensive territories on the frontier and in Castile, and he was made commander of all troops in Toledo and leader of Extremadura. In June 1132, he gathered the militias of Avila, Segovia, Toledo, and the other cities under Toledo's jurisdiction and combined this force of both cavalry and infantry with an even larger army drawn from Castile and Extremadura. He then led them in a raid into Muslim territory, down the valley of the Guadalquivir, devastating the environs of Seville. The Chronica Adefonsi notes that he cut down the fruit trees. He took many captives and a large booty. The Almoravid governor of Seville, Umar, raised a large army from among his allies and fought Rodrigo in a pitched battle. Rodrigo divided his infantry into two groups, archers and slingers, and placed his bravest men at the front. The second line was composed of the militia of Avila, which engaged an Arab wing, and the third of the militia of Segovia, which faced an Almoravid and Andalusian wing. The militia of Toledo and the troops from the Transierra and Castile were left in reserve at the rear, under the personal command of Rodrigo, to reinforce the weak and to bring medical aid to the wounded. Umar was captured and ultimately beheaded. So important was this battle that it was recorded in 3 chronicles: the Chronica Adefonsi, the Annal Toledanos Primeros, and the Arabic Chronicle of Ibn Idari. The author of the Chronica, probably Bishop Arnaldo of Astorga, quotes from I Maccabees 9 in describing an encounter he evidently considered of biblical proportions. The battle began as the Saracens shouted and sounded the brazen trumpets and drums. They uttered cries and invoked Muhammad. The Christians called out with all the heart to the Lord, to Mary and to St. James. They prayed that they would show them mercy and forget the sins of the king and of the forefathers. Many on both sides fell wounded shortly after the battle had begun. Rodrigo realized that the king of Sevilla's army was the stronger. Consequently, all of the bravest warriors joined with Rodrigo and their attack. The king of Seville fell in the field and died, as did many of his officers. Rodrigo González pursued the survivors all the way to the gates of Sevilla. After picking up the spoils, he began his march back to the camp. The victory of Rodrigo inspired a contingent from Salamanca to go raiding in the region around Badajoz. Some Muladies, Muslims living under Christian rule that had fled Rodrigo's camp, had given away the Salamancans' position to the Almoravid Sultan, Ali ibn Yusuf ben Tashfin, who promptly attacked and defeated it. In late May 1133, Rodrigo commanded half of the royal army marching out from Toledo. The army was divided because there was not enough drinking water, nor was there enough grass to feed the animals. Rodrigo led his forces through the Despenapros Pass. The two armies traversed uninhabited territory for 15 days before meeting before the enemy castle at Galido. Thereafter the army followed same route as in the previous year, the Guadalquivir Valley as far as Seville, but then continued on to Jerez de la Frontera, which was sacked, and Cadiz, whose countryside was terrorized. The army returned to Toledo by late summer with a vast booty of camels, horses, cattle, sheep, and goats. In July 1135, Alfonso gave him and Rodrigo Martinez some properties confiscated from another rebel, the Asturian Gonzalo Pelaez. One historian believes he regained the long-lost fief of Asturias de Lara at about this time. By July 1135, Rodrigo had contracted a second marriage to Estefania, daughter of Ermengol Virgil and widow of the Castilian magnate Fernando Garce. Estefania had received a carta de arras from her first husband on the 12th of November 1119, and she was widowed around 1125. Despite this, on the 6th of September 1135, Rodrigo praised his new wife for her youth in his carta de arras. On the 7th of September 1135, Rodrigo witnessed a donation of the churches of Tovar and Laguna by his eldest daughter, Elvira, and her husband, the brother of his new wife, Ermengol Virgil, to the convent of Santa Maria de Valladolid. Estefania bore Rodrigo two sons, Pedro and Rodrigo. Exile and wanderings. On the 3rd of February 1137, Rodrigo made a donation to Segovia Cathedral. Shortly after, for reasons unknown, Rodrigo fell from favor and was exiled. According to at least one manuscript of the Chronica Adefonsi Imperatoris, this occurred in October 1134, but documentary evidence seems to indicate that it actually took place in 1137. Of his own accord he surrendered Toledo and the other tenancies he held, which still included Aguilar and Old Castile according to royal documents date as late as the 1st of April 1137, to the king in person. He decided to turn his exile into a pilgrimage, visiting Jerusalem and fighting the Muslims in the Holy Land for 2 years. He reputedly built the castle called Tehran facing Ascalon, which was then still in Muslim hands. The Chronicler says that he garrisoned it with knights, infantrymen, and provisions, and he gave it to the Knights Templars. Rodrigo returned to Spain, via the Adriatic and Italy, in 1139, and being barred from returning to Castile, his patrimonial lands, sojourned at various courts in the east of the peninsula. He served for a time Raymond Berengar IV of Barcelona, who made him Lord of Huesca and Jaca between 1139 and 1141. He was later in the service of Garcia Ramirez of Navarre and then the Almoravid, governor of Valencia, a Benguenia. The Chronica Adefonsi says that while he only stayed a few days at Valencia, he contracted leprosy. He did briefly return to Castile, where on the 8th of February 1141 he granted the village of Huemices to the Benedictines of Arlanza. He eventually made his way to the Urgell, where on the 24th of March 1143 he witnessed, as comes Rorigus, the final will and testament of his brother-in-law and son-in-law, Count Ermengol. His daughter Elvira had probably died by then. Sometime in or after 1143, he returned to the Holy Land, and there he died. Shortly before her husband's death, Estefania founded a Cistercian monastery at Valbuena de Duero. Her sons, unlike the sons of her husband's brother, never rose to as high a rank in the kingdom as the father had. Historian Antonio Suarez de Alarcón owned several manuscript fragments of the Chronica, which were used by Enrique Flores in amending the first published edition of the text by Francisco de Berganza. Alarcón himself had made extensive use only of those passages relating to Rodrigo González, since he had established the descent of the Marqueses de Trocifil from him in his Relaciones Genealógicas de la Casa de los Marqueses de Trocifil, Constitutores Vedras, Bibliography. S. Barton. The Count, the Bishop and the Abbot, Ermengol Virgil and the Abbey of Valladolid. English Historical Review. 111 to 440, 85 to 103. Barton. The Aristocracy in 12th Century Leon and Castile. Cambridge, Cambridge University Press, 1997. Barton. From Tyrants to Soldiers of Christ, The Nobility of 12th Century Leon Castile and the Struggle Against Islam. Nottingham Medieval Studies, 44, 28-48. J. M. Canal Sanchez Pagin. Don Pedro Fernández, Primer Maestra de la Orden Militar de Santiago, Su Familia, Su Vida. Anuario de Estudios Medievales, 14, 33-71. J. M. Canal Sanchez Pagin. Casamientos de los Condes de Urgel en Castilla. Anuario de Estudios Medievales, 19, 119-135. S.R. Doubleday. The Lara Family, Crown and Nobility in Medieval Spain. Cambridge, Massachusetts. Harvard University Press, 2001. R.A. Fletcher. St. James's Catapult. The Life and Times of Diego Gelmírez of Santiago de Compostela. Oxford. Oxford University Press, 1984. EFLOREZ. Annal Toledanas y España Sagrada, 23, 381-400. Madrid, 1767. G.E. Lipskey. The Chronicle of Alfonso the Emperor, a translation of the Chronica ad Alfonsi Imperatoris. Ph.D. dissertation, Northwestern University, 1972. J. Montenegro Valentin. Santa Maria de Piasca, Estudio de un territorio a través de un centro monástico. Valladolid, 1993. EPASCUA. South of the Pyrenees, Kings, Magnates and Political Bargaining in 12th Century Spain. Journal of Medieval History, 27, 101-120. J. Phillips. The Second Crusade, Extending the Frontiers of Christendom. Yale University Press, 2007. J. F. Powers. A Society Organized for War. The Iberian Municipal Militias in the Central Middle Ages, 1000-1284. Berkeley. University of California Press, 1987. B. F. Riley. The Kingdom of Leon Castilla under Queen Urraca, 1109-1126. Princeton. Princeton University Press, 1982. B. F. Riley. The Kingdom of Leon Castilla under King Alfonso VI, 1065-1109. Princeton. Princeton University Press, 1989. B. F. Riley. The Kingdom of Leon Castilla under King Alfonso VII, 1126-1157. Philadelphia, University of Pennsylvania Press, 1998.